Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
In 2010, Brigadier General Stephen L. Salazar and Colonel Mary Lopez founded the Leader 360 program, while Brigadier General Salazar was the commanding general of the Joint Multinational Training Command, U.S. Army Europe and 7th Army. Brigadier General Salazar and Colonel Mary Lopez implemented the Soldier 360 program as the cornerstone of the community's suicide prevention campaign. The Grafenwohr military community encompassed the German state of Bavaria and comprised 42,000 soldiers, civilians, and their family members. Brigadier General Stephen L. Salazar retired August 1, 2012, following 36 years of service in the United States Army. He is co-founder of Soldier 360 and has been CEO of 360 Inc. since 2013. In 2015, he co-founded and serves as president of the 360 Veterans Association. Dr. Mary Lopez founded the Leader 360 program with Brigadier General Salazar in 2010 in Germany and continues to work to help build resources to strengthen our active duty and veteran service members, to reduce suicides and other adverse effects of the stresses and traumas of serving in the military. Dr. Lopez retired from military service after 33 years as an Army officer. She is a certified professional ergonomist and a licensed occupational therapist. Well, thank you all for being here. It's a delight to meet you, and I was hoping you could let us know a little bit about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Really appreciate the opportunity to join you and the Journey's Dream team. We started the 360 program when Dr. Mary Lopez and I were still on active duty in Grafenwohr, Germany in 2010. It actually began in about 2009. I had come out of my second tour in Iraq. I was arriving to take command of the Grafenwohr military community in Germany, where we had about 42,000 soldiers, civilians, and family members. And as I was arriving, I was notified that we had a suicide of a soldier in a brigade combat team that was deployed to Iraq. And when I started looking into it, I found out that we had had more suicide in that brigade combat team in a year of combat than they'd had during their entire tour, which is really, quite upside down. And unfortunately, I think we have found, and I don't have the statistics behind it, but when you look into, I know anecdotally from talking to a number of soldiers that they went through very significant combat experiences, but they have since lost more colleagues to suicide than they did in that actual combat fight. And so that was the kind of scenario we were in. This is 2009. It was very tough. There was a lot of stress in our command because we had units coming back from a year-long deployment in Iraq, and they were going to turn around and then go to Afghanistan. So it was redeploy, awful lot of stress. So in the Army at this time recognized the challenge in suicide prevention and started a suicide prevention campaign. So we started our own suicide prevention campaign in our community. And then I got introduced, our medical commander introduced me to Dr. Mary Lopez, who you see here, who was tasked to develop a course to help redeploying soldiers cope with the consequences of their combat experience, specifically address kind of their mental health. What she designed, which ultimately we termed the 360 course, is a program. It's a holistic health integrative resilience program we call it Skills for Leaders, Skills for Life, to equip these young military members with, resilient skills to be able to be stronger physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. And then in turn, they will be more effective leaders by doing so. So we rolled out our very first class in March of 2010. I asked Dr. Lopez to evaluate it because we were taking time and a little bit of money to make this happen. We want to see that it actually made a difference. We used what's called the Kirkpatrick training model to evaluate, which has 4 levels, which is, did they like it? Did they learn? Did it make a difference? And, did they use it? And ultimately, did it make a difference? And we found statistically that it made a significant difference. So we continued to deliver the course within our command. And then years later, as Dr. Lopez retired and there was interest for the 360 course across the Army, she formed a woman-owned small business to be able to deliver the course to active duty military members and their spouses under small government contracts. So we have continued to do that for the past 11 years now. We have trained about 3,500 soldiers who supervise over 50,000 military members both civilian and military. And I'll say soldiers on occasion as we go through the call. When I say soldiers, I use the definition that Colin Powell did, which is soldiers are soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. So Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. I refer to all of them as soldiers. So one of the things that has evolved in my personal thinking is that this term in our lexicon seems to be broken or flawed, because we refer to being physically fit. And I think we all kind of have an image of what physically fit means. We go out and we work out to become physically fit. And our soldiers start with this when they go through their military training. But when we refer to mentally fit, the term we use is mental health. And when we refer to mental health or behavioral health, we're typically thinking of some sort of an ailment or some sort of an unhealth. It just seems like the lexicon is backwards. And we are not, when we refer to mental health, we're thinking of someone who has a disability or a challenge or a shortcoming, as opposed to someone who is doing all that they can using various different resources, to include those that we provide during the 360 course, to be as mentally well and healthy as they possibly can be. And that's the part of what we're trying to accomplish through our 360 course, is train these leaders so that we can help change the culture within our military and make, mental health, look at mental health from a affirmational standpoint, that this is something we are doing day in and day out to improve our mental health. I mentioned soldiers going through physical training. Soldiers also go through first aid. In our military care system, there are 3 levels of care. There's self-care, buddy care, first aid, that you take care of yourself or take care of your buddy. And then there's kind of your level 1, which is traumatic emergency care. And then ultimately level 3, when you get to an inpatient hospital. And I think we could look at, we look at our physical health that way, but for some reason we don't look at our mental health that way, that, we are doing our own to be as mentally fit as we possibly can. And whenever we have a shortcoming, we can turn to our buddy, or we can rely on some tools that we have put in our kit as our own first aid to help promote our own mental health. And then in turn, when that's not working for us, we can go reach out to that next level, whether that's the chaplain or the local unit psychologist. And then ultimately, if necessary, and it becomes more clinical, then we could take it to the next level, to level 3 and into a hospital if necessary. For some reason, we stigmatize mental health. One of the things we talk about in our course is, getting into that climate in which, in many of our high-end units, after you've gone for a long run because you're preparing for something physically, and you walk in, your buddies say, "How are you doing today?" And somebody will say, "Oh, my neck is a little sore, or my back's a little sore because I did this 12-mile road march yesterday," or whatever the case may be. And it's kind of a badge of honor. But nobody walks in and says, "I'm a little bit down. I got some bad news yesterday. Something happened to my family. I think I ate something wrong, so my nutrition is off," whatever the case may be. And we don't have that kind of conversation. We love to see in our military, we get to that kind of conversation, in which, understanding that being mentally well is something we have to work on day in and day out, and minute by minute in some cases. And that's an accepted, and it becomes an understanding of what it is that we do. So back to the 360 story. So we've been given the course for many years, and for many years during graduations, I would literally say, there are no guarantees in life, but we offer a lifetime warranty. 360 does, but we did not have a means of doing that. So Dr. Lopez and I co-founded a nonprofit organization, 360 Veterans Association. It is a 501c19 war veterans organization. So it is comprised of its members. And so everyone who goes to the 360 course is invited to become a member of 360 Veterans Association, so that they can get services and support through their lifetime to continue their journey of being as 360 strong as they possibly can be.
So how many people have you run through the course, either from its inception or the past, 5 years, or what's the level
we've
of
we've done 3,500 active duty military members. And let me give you, and we focus on our first line leaders. And the reason is because we believe that is the decisive point. My story is that when I was in command, not long after we started 360 course, the Army published a 385-page report called the Health Promotion, Risk Reduction, Suicide Prevention Study. It was a mouthful. I read every page because I was trying to find out what's the answer to our suicide problem. And note it says not just suicide prevention, but health promotion. And there was a very significant chart that I'll never forget, and had this spiral across the bottom. And what it talked about is that there's a study of transition stress. And then in every transition event, there is either some sort of traumatic growth or a challenge that comes with that. And in that study, they found that the average non-commissioned officer in our Army who has served to about the 8-year point has gone through an equivalent number of life transitions. In other words, graduated from high school, got a job, got a promotion, moved, got married, had a kid, bought a house, retired, as does the average American male that lives to 80. Picture that, all of that compressed into that 8 years of service. So that I kind of picture that, that it's the coal being hardened or the turtles that have made their way up to the beach safely. And the perception was that these, because they are high performing non-commissioned officers, which they are, these are very high performing first line leaders. However, the reality is that they're not as strong as they should be. And the deduction from that's my deduction, but the deduction from the study was that since these guys seem to be high performing, we should focus our Army resources on our high risk population, which are our 18 to 22-year-olds. And in my view, great analysis, wrong deduction, because the high risk population has been 18-year-old privates ever since I was an 18-year-old private, and they always be 18-year-old privates because they're 18-year-old privates just coming out of civilian society. The difference is in our non-commissioned officers. When I was a young private, literally in 1976, when I was a young private, my NCO was a young E5 buck sergeant who was 32 years old. He had come from a nuclear family. He had one wife, 2 kids, 1 car, knew how to balance his checkbook, and he wrote a 5-paragraph operations order every time he was going to take his family away on vacation. Nowadays, and there's and not an indictment, but our society is very different. So our military members represent our society, right? So 50% of them come from broken families or broken homes. 30% of them are survivors of some sort of adverse childhood experiences, some sort of trauma, domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault. It's staggering numbers. And we make them non-commissioned officers very, very quickly. Some of them are 22 to 24 years old. So they are barely adults themselves. And they have come from an environment in which they have not seen effective parenting or couples communication. They don't know how to do those things properly. They don't know how to balance their checkbooks, manage their finances. So they don't have that ability to impart these kind of life skills to the young individual soldiers, the high-risk population that we're dealing with. They're dealing with their own alcohol and substance abuse challenges, their own mental health challenges, and their own relationship challenges. And so that's the reason we focus on this decisive point, these non-commissioned officers. We believe if we equip them with these skills, they will be better individuals. They'll be better husbands, better fathers, sons, daughters, mothers, wives, and in return, they will also be better leaders. We also find that in our military, so many of our services are undersubscribed. So everything that we do, virtually everything we do in the 360 course, there is a program somewhere in the Army that provides it, right? You can find a yoga instructor, you can find a mental health provider, you can find, you can do physical therapy, you can find a financial counselor, but they don't do it in an integrative way that incentivizes these leaders to embrace these skills and accept these skills and start to make them a part of their lives and really make a change. And once those individuals have done that, they're more likely to grab, their young soldier, young private Salazar, and say, "Hey, Steve, come with me. I'm taking you to finance," before they get bounce a check. So we call it get in left of boom. This is what we're trying to do in our command. This comes from our counter IED strategy in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is to defeat the IED before it detonates. So that means getting to, interdict the IED before it gets planted or whatever the case may be. So unfortunately, in our military, many of our services, our financial counseling, our social services, and our alcohol and substance abuse counseling they don't take care of the soldier till after some adverse event has taken place, after they've gotten a DUI, after they've failed a drug analysis test, after they have bounced a check at the PX, after they have committed or they've been caught or indicted for some sort of domestic violence incident. And what we're trying to do is get in front of all of those things, which increases the rate of referrals to military services. So we believe that this same approach can be of value in our civil society, because we're looking now at the fact that this military population that we're helping now, they've come from civil society. They're going to go back to civil society. And oh, by the way, the systemic challenges are within our civil society, which is the reason we admire what Journey's Dream is doing. Same challenges. We're just in just a different, unique culture and climate within the military, but with a whole lot of resources that are undersubscribed.
So let me ask you to take a breath, because I need to take
please.
a breath and try and catch up with what you're saying, because there's a lot there. And is it my understanding, am I understanding it correctly, that what you're doing is working with active duty people
Yes.
only?
Yes.
Okay.
We get some veterans. We also get Gold Star family members. I don't know if you know what a Gold Star family member is. So we have Gold Star family members. We have one very special Gold Star family member who is also a Leadership Award recipient for our class, whose husband died by suicide. He was an Army major, died by suicide, and then she considered suicide herself as well.
Well, there's some resources that I want to make sure that you are aware of after this video. I'm thinking of people that we've interviewed that are helping with the transition from active duty to civilian life. We had a team of people on that do that. Right. And then they referred me to somebody who works, I think, through Rush in Chicago, and she's a Gold Star mother, but she's leading that program. And I want to make sure there's some cross referrals here and make sure that one source might feed the other, because there's a lot of really good stuff happening.
Yeah, appreciate that. Let me add one more, just real quick. So in 2011, the Defense Center of Excellence for PTSD and TBI was looking for resilience programs to evaluate. So Dr. Lopez raised her hand. They evaluated our program, published their report in 2012, and they found statistical evidence that this 360 course reduced psychopathology, meaning if you came in with symptoms of post-traumatic stress, it mitigated those symptoms. It improved well-being, meaning you were happier with yourself, happier with your unit, happier with the Army, happier with your family, and improved sleep, meaning you could go to sleep on time, stay asleep, and wake up when you wanted to. We think those are very significant outcomes. And we believe that the one thing they did not find was evidence of pain mitigation, but we've done a lot to improve that in that area as well. So we know we have significant statistical results, and we know we got tremendous anecdotal results. I can't count the number of soldiers who have told us that the course saved their lives.
So what is the length or duration of the course?
It has been a 1-week course. We've turned it back into a 2-week course. And during COVID, we've done it on a virtual platform. We've done it on Microsoft Teams over a 2-week period of time. And again, we invite spouses to participate.
And over the course of that 1 week or 2 weeks, how many days or hours is the actual contact?
It's 4 hours each morning over the course of the 2 weeks.
Okay, great.
And then we do one-on-one sessions. So each individual who goes to the course gets a one-on-one session we start with yoga every morning, and then we do course content from about 9 to noon. And then individuals get to sign up for a one-on-one session with a psychologist, physical therapist, spiritual counselor, financial advisor, and we also do hypnotherapy.
Wonderful.
So Mary is a certified hypnotherapist, and we get some tremendous results out of the hypnotherapy.
Wonderful. So Mary, do you want to chime in here?
And Steve always does an excellent job of giving an overview of our starting, but there are a couple of points that I wanted to make sure we emphasized. 2010 was a really tough time. Lots of troops were coming back from downrange, and we were concerned, as Steve said, with what we were seeing: the alcohol, the risk-taking behavior, the relationship failures, divorces, suicides. Tough time. And they said, we need to do something. So we systematically looked at the programs that existed at that time. And they talk about the field of 1,000 blooms, and everybody's good idea was up there, but it was chaotic. It was disjointed. I was a full colonel. I couldn't figure out how to navigate the system. How do you expect someone else to do that? So we came up with a proposal, as Steve said, to target the non-commissioned officer, because in our system, as Steve said, they're the first identifier and first responder. They look their troops in the eye every day and say, how are you doing? What's going on with you? Our original intent was give them more tools in their leader toolkit so they can better identify and respond to their troops' issues. But what we found was that the NCOs themselves had been deployed so many times. They had so much of their own trauma that they were carrying that many didn't realize how disconnected they'd become, how inefficient they were, and ineffective as a leader, because they were so involved with what they were carrying. And in some cases, to be honest, they became frankly toxic leaders. So the program Also, everything we do is science-based. We had to be able, so 2010, we had a lot of skeptics. We had a lot of commanders who were skeptical about what you're going to do, this hippy-dippy crazy stuff. You're going to have them do yoga. You're going to turn my tough soldiers into sissies, or what are you doing? And so in order to justify what we were doing, everything had to be solidly grounded in the science. And we spent some time looking at all of the research. And so everything we talked about was solid. And then we also said, make it truly holistic. And this is our challenge. I think it's our challenge in the military system. It's our challenge in the civilian system, that everything is stovepiped. But people are a complex interaction of stuff. You know, for example, we'd have soldiers who had problems with alcohol. So you send them to the alcohol counselor. They're going to talk about drinking behavior, how much alcohol is in a shot glass, but they don't talk about issues with sleep or stress or what happened downrange or spiritual issues or relationship failures or pain, anything that's related to the drinking behavior. You could send them for years. You're not going to get the solid balanced troop. So we said, make it truly holistic. And as Steve's going to talk more about what we do, we talk about stress, the science of stress and stress management. And then we do this learn through doing. The intent is give them more tools in their toolkit, but also take care of themselves. Like Steve said, healthy leaders are more effective leaders. You have to have your own mask on first before you can help the next person. And so we wanted to give them tools, and they improve themselves through doing. And in fact, our topics have evolved over the past 10, 11, 12 years now, based on science. We at first just talked about the basics of science, of stress. And now we talk about stress as an inflammatory response. We talk about the structure of the brain and how to keep our brains healthy. We talk about the importance of sleep and then nutrition and the gut-brain connection. And so we've been able to evolve the curriculum based on science developments. And so, you know, from a science perspective, what does it take? 25 years before science discoveries actually become part of our everyday behavior. And so we're facilitating that by giving these to the leaders. And the number that we've trained is 3,500, but the real impact is that they supervise 50,000 people, 50,000 soldiers. And so now you've empowered our foot soldiers to be that first identifier. What's going on with you? First identifier, here's a tool, science-based tool, try this. And then from a systems perspective, they are the referral network. And so if they know what the services do, the spiritual counselors, the financial counselors, the psychologists, they know what it is. And I identify this person and I say, you really need to talk to a chaplain. In the past, I'd have somebody who has a problem with alcohol, I'd send them right away to the alcohol counselor. But as I sit down and I talk to them and I identify really what's going on with them, I send them to the right place. Right. And so now you have a timely intervention, a timely and effective intervention, because you've empowered your foot soldiers to start becoming those change agents within our system. And it works. And like Steve said, you know, we've got the research that's behind it. I think we're the only program in the Department of Defense that has solid outcomes-based research that supports what we're doing. And it's truly holistic. So our team, and Steve's going to talk about this, it's a high-powered team. The strength is in the team, and every member of the team is important. The yoga instructor, the financial counselor, the spiritual counselor, the physical therapist, the psychologist, all of us, every single person has a part of it. And then we really do get that truly holistic change. The change you see in people in 2 weeks is greater than you would see in 5 years in a disconnected system, and it's powerful. And that change persists, and that's the important part. It's not just like a one and done. They've done the class, I feel good at the end, and then I go back to same behaviors, because it's that 2 weeks and they've done that learn through doing. They realize that personal benefit. You have change that persists. And we've followed them up 5, 10 years. They're still using the 360 tools. So this stuff works, and it changes lives and it makes a difference. And that's our passion, because it works.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mary. And, you know, we have testimonials from everything from save my life to save my marriage to help me stop drinking, help me stop smoking, help me communicate more effectively with my spouse, with my children. And I was just making the thought came to Mary while you were just talking. I think we've had generational change, not only the 50,000 that they lead, but, you know, the children that they are raising. If we have changed the climate and the environment within their homes, and the way that they raise their children has changed. We know that. We have evidence of that. Mary, you want to tell the story of the first sergeant who's kid was talking?
This one, it still gives me goosebumps when I think about it. So way back when we were doing the classes in Germany, we had an NCO who brought his spouse and his child, and we sat down and had dinner with them. And the wife said, "I have this beautiful 5-year-old boy, and he's wonderful, but he hasn't said a word. He doesn't speak, right?" And that NCO, I have to tell you that NCO came angry, and you could just feel it. You know, when you sit next to somebody and they can almost vibrate the anger. This guy was an angry fellow, right? So we go through the class, and halfway through, he stands up and says, "I have an anger issue." And his wife is in the back, and she just bursts into tears, and they talking about how to work on it. At the very end of the class, the wife comes up and she said, "I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden my son is talking." And so this is the thing, you know, that kid knew that if he said something, Dad's angry, it's safer, don't say a word, right? But what was going to happen when he started going to school? He's going to be a troubled child. He's not going to be successful in school. You know, he's going to struggle. And you see the pathway that this kid was going to take. But you go back to that pivotal event. Dad says, "I've got an anger issue and I've got to do something about it." Kid feels safe in that home. Huge difference, right? And he starts to talk and he gains self-confidence. Totally different trajectory for that child back at that one pivotal point. And then we see this repeatedly at that one pivot point. Steve talks about the swerve event, right, Steve? And that's what we're doing. We just change this pathway. And
we've had amazing testimonials about substance abuse, you know, and domestic violence. Young men who will say that my father was abused by my grandfather, and I was abused by my father, but it stops with me. You know, whether it was sexual abuse, child abuse, or alcohol, you know, alcoholism. It says it stops with me. And we can't imagine anything more powerful than that. And the domestic violence, I can't tell you, you know, when we first started this, we were in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then, of course, things have evolved to where we're not as much in a, you know, our soldiers don't have as much combat experience, but the amount of trauma that these young leaders bring into the course is mind-boggling to me. The number of them who have been sexually assaulted as children and abused is just staggering. I mean, these are great young leaders, but they've been through tremendous abuse. We had a graduation recently where one soldier said, this is a young staff sergeant leading soldiers in combat, you know, leads soldiers, you know, our nation's treasure. He says, "My very first memory was being in a foster home and being at the age of 4 and being sexually assaulted. My second memory was being sexually assaulted by a different individual at the age of 4 in that same foster home." Can you imagine? I mean, this is his very first memories in life. And then he goes on with the rest of his story, which is just continues to be tragic and tragic and tragic. And it's just mind-boggling. And this is a guy serving our country.
So
I'm sorry, something to add. Let me tell you why this course is so different than every other course in the military. And I spent 32 years in active duty military. So I've been through all kinds of military training, to include Ranger School and others. But what makes this course unique is that, first of all, it is about you. It is not about teaching you how to lead or teaching you how to be more tactically or technically proficient. It's teaching you how to be a better you. The other is, as Dr. Lopez pointed out, it's all evidence-based. You know, some of it may seem like hippy-dippy stuff, but all of it's based in the science, and it's proven to work. The other, it is being delivered by experts. Much of our military training is kind of passed on training. It's like the last person holding the slide of PowerPoint slides is now going to give the class that was generated in the Pentagon somewhere or some other command. They don't know anything about it. They just know what's on the PowerPoint slide. Whereas our course is taught by true experts, and they are all passionate. They are experts in their field. They love and they care about soldiers and their families. And they've all been through their own life challenges, and they share those life challenges with our students. And that's really, really powerful.
Excellent.
So Shirley went through the class, and she has a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to ask Shirley, what have you seen? And she's actually, I have to say this, she's one of our personal heroes, because you'll get to know her strength as she talks, but she has gone on and started The Healing Continues. And I can't tell you what an effect that has had for our alumni. So Shirley, you're on, my friend.
Thank you. Well, I had the wonderful blessing of getting to attend the course in 2020 when I started working with individuals, sending them to the course. And so in 2020, I attended the course because I wanted to know, hey, what am I sending people to? I want to know, are we getting our bang for the buck? Or how are people coming out? And I suspected that it was good. I saw the agenda, saw the holistic stuff. That's always a win-win. And so what I didn't know is that it was going to be life-changing for me. So you will never find a course like this. And I talk to the students who attend this. I see their feedback, and they all say the same thing over and over again. Everybody should attend this. This should be mandatory. This is life-changing, and it doesn't matter where somebody was voluntold to go to it or they went on their own. The results is the same. For me personally, sitting through the 2 weeks, I am a civilian with the Air Force, so civilians with the military can go also. So that is in the capacity to which I went. And so, as you heard earlier, I am a survivor of domestic violence. At that point in 2020, when I went, nobody knew that. That was something that I was carrying with me because of embarrassment and shame. And so you can only imagine possibly the mental trauma and the trauma that I was going through daily. But it is through attending the course and doing the hypnosis visual imagery with Dr. Lopez that I came up out of that, vomiting and sharing my story and forgiving myself and forgiving the person that had did what they had done to me, which then really up until that point in time in my life, which the domestic violence had happened a couple of years prior to that, is that I had been living a life in my past full of pain and anguish that I was covering. So we hear these stories throughout the course because one of the things that is an intangible from this 360 course is the environment that is produced of love, of kindness, of non-judgment. We take you as you are. We're all here together. And life is a process that we go through, and we all have experienced things, and it's okay. And it is through the course that I see why I have made the choices that I have made. I have learned more about myself and to understand myself. So now, as I go out in the world, my approach and my interactions with others is different. When I first shared my story in the class, I would just cry all the way through the story and could barely make it through. But that was July of 2020 that I attended the course. And since then, every course that they have done, I have been a guest speaker, and I speak on my story of domestic violence. And every course, somebody's heart opens up to help them on this journey. The other thing that is very special about the 360 course is the 360 VA, the nonprofit portion. I'm a groupie for life. So I'm a lifelong member. Everybody's a lifelong member anyway. It's free of charge. They don't charge you a dime for anything. They don't ask you. There's no fundraising. Just come as you are, and we're going to love on you and help you through life, holistically continue on. Normally, when you finish a course, the course is over. We say goodbye. Maybe you'll see a follow-up survey, and we'll follow up with you in a year or two to see how things are going. That is not the case with 360. 360 VA immediately picks you up, and it's a lifelong membership of utilizing the skills that you've learned, staying socially connected, physically connected, and continuing on those courses. One of the things, and Dr. Lopez and Steve can talk more about it, but they had a desire to start a group for a while that worked with people who had experienced some sort of trauma, because many of the students had experienced trauma, or many of the students were supporting somebody who's experiencing trauma. And so again, it is very empowering, as you know, when you are at a point that you can share your story. I call myself a survivor because I am not a victim. I am a survivor. As I tell the group, I do not wish this life that I had upon anybody else. But the blessing in the lemonade, if you will, is that now I share my story and it helps others. And now we have this group that's been going over a year of Healing Continues. Everything is volunteer. I don't do it on my own. I'm just a person that facilitates, but there is a Ph.D. person in there, a psychologist, there is a chaplain. And again, it's just a place where people can know that they're not alone and share their experience. And we read books, we provide support, we just keep going. And so like there's nothing like this. And again, I'll say it again, life changing for others who attended, but from my personal self, the way that I went in the course was not the way that I came out 2 weeks later. And forever I am a better version of myself.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Excellent.
So, Dr. Hayes, that's our passion. People like Shirley. And our mission, our goal is to make our entire military a better place for every one of our soldiers to serve, to grow, and to lead. We know it can be a better place than it is now. We know we can mitigate. We can improve mental health. We can mitigate the risk of suicide, and we can mitigate the risk of sexual assault and domestic violence and alcohol and substance abuse in our military.
So how do people find out about the 360 program, and how do people help you promote it or expand it?
So I think you've looked at our website. So first, for the leadership courses, 360-program.com. So www.360-program.com. And then our nonprofit is 360VA. So 360va.org. And so on 360va.org, you can donate, and your donate goes towards the services that we provide to our members, to include Shirley, who leads the Healing Continues program. And we've got two initiatives right now that we're specifically looking for funding for. One is, I mentioned Gold Star family members. During this time of COVID, when we've been doing our courses virtual, our Gold Star family members have been able to participate remotely, so there's been no cost. We don't charge them to participate in that class. However, as we go back to live courses, there's going to be a cost associated with travel, accommodation, and so forth. And we provide course materials in the course itself. And so we're looking for a corporate donor right now to be able to fund 10 Gold Star family members to participate in 360 courses in 2022. So we're looking for $36,000 for that.
Dr. Hayes, may I add one other thing?
Shirley, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So this is interesting because one of my roles and responsibilities when the course is in San Antonio, where I live, is to sign people up for the class and make sure they're registered and ready to go. The interesting thing is through the command, we know we do some marketing and put the information out there. But as I said, I joined in 2020. Pretty much most of the people come by word of mouth. Other students within the class, before a class is even ready to rock and roll, the attendance roster is at least halfway full. Just merely from word of mouth of somebody who attended the course, or somebody, and they spoke of it, or somebody saw a difference in that person's life. And they're like, I want some of that. Some work sections send their whole, like the whole staff, we all need to go. We're shutting it down.
And that's what we want. Many leaders go back and say, you need to go to this course next time it comes in.
Absolutely. The interesting thing also is in one of my roles that I work at, I work with a lot of helping agencies on the installation. And so this course is so well favored is that in the community between clinical and non-clinical, the clinical portion wants to say, hey, how can we use 360 course and 360 VA in a non-clinical capacity to facilitate people's life and holistic healing? So through that avenue, this also becomes a point of where marketing happens, is that we have all these other tools. You have financial, and you have military family life consultants, and you have chaplains, but we also have another tool in our toolkit is the 360 course. And so at least I can just speak for where I'm at. It just kind of goes.
It's a tipping point.
It is.
Well, I am thrilled that you're willing to share this with us. I have several different connections, as I mentioned, that I'm going to make sure we try to cross-pollinate and make sure that I'm thinking of some people I know who are in the military currently, and I just want to make sure they know about 360. I don't know how this gets spread out throughout the military, if everybody in the military already knows about 360 VA, but anything that I can do, and I will do, I'll reach out to a few people I know in the military and veterans I know who might have connections, and make sure they get a hold of this video and start to learn about it and spread the word.
Great.
That'd be great.
Appreciate that. Really appreciate your support. Appreciate your mission and what you're doing.
Yes.
Really, really important.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.